Okay, our last speaker is Dale McGowan. He is the author who co-authored Parenting Beyond Belief and Raising Freethinkers. These are two of the books that I read raising my two girls, and it helped a great deal, both freethinkers. But Dale and I were talking, and sometimes when we raise our kids, as happened with me, things don't happen the way you want. And I had my two daughters have had some really serious issues. What I suggest when you have these kinds, I have one that is she's very, very smart, and she gave me a run for my money right from the get-go. I couldn't keep up with her. I wasn't as smart as she was. She was always ahead of me, and I just, So, and even she made the teachers a mess. She was just, a handful. But I found out that I decided I was going to get a psychiatrist. I got her a psychiatrist. And my next suggestion, get your psychiatrist a psychiatrist. And here's Dale.
Thanks, Joyce. Hi, everybody. Gosh, what a privilege to follow these speakers today. My goodness. Right from the beginning all the way through, this has just been a really terrific day. I hope you'll agree. Now, it's interesting, the Chris's started off at the family level at the beginning, and then we kind of got pulled out to the big picture and looked at some of these larger issues, church-state separation and racial justice issues and activism and so on. I'm going to bring that arc back to the family here at the end. And I was excited when Joyce said that she wanted me to talk about experiencing awe and wonder. It's one of my favorite topics to write about and talk about. And one of the things that is really tremendous about the experience of wonder and bringing this into your family is that you don't have to go to the Grand Canyon, you don't have to spend a lot of money. The experience of awe and wonder is really a matter of shifting your perspective on the world that you are already in. You are surrounded already by indescribable wonder. For example, yesterday I was in the Atlanta airport leaving home, and I was grouchy because I had to get up very early to catch the flight, and I was seated between two linebackers. And in that sort of sweaty, waiting for takeoff thing you do, right? And you're just waiting. And then I looked out the window, and about 200 feet away, this giant, I mean really giant, metal tube full of people jumped into the sky. I'm not kidding. And then 5 minutes later, our metal tube jumped into the sky, and I ended up here. That's the kind of wonder that we're surrounded by all the time. But you didn't gasp when I said it because it happens all the time, right? It happens 95,000 times a day a plane takes off, right? Roughly one every second. That really puts plane crashes in perspective, doesn't it? It's a very safe thing. But it's something that because it's familiar, we stop noticing. And what Richard Dawkins called the anesthetic of familiarity starts to set in. That's the main opponent to the experience of wonder. Here's another one. We all emerged into the world from our mother's bodies. And then we forget. We just stop realizing that the way we got here was through someone's body. Parents create life, right? We create life, and for just a little while we're kind of awestruck about it. And then we're tying its shoes and feeding it breakfast, and we should sit across from the breakfast table the whole time going at this thing that we did, but we forget because it becomes commonplace. Right? My kids think that pulling up a YouTube video on an iPhone in a moving car is nice, but not incredible, because they've never known a time when you couldn't do that. I still have a little bit of, oh my gosh, when that happens, but I'm even losing that with some of these amazing things. I contain, oh by the way, there's the tube, the metal tube, I forgot to show you. I contain 60,000 miles of blood vessels. 60,000 miles. Now, I put that number into my head through my eyes about 10 years ago, right? And it stuck because I liked it enough to remember whatever that means, right? This is a process I don't understand. And when I needed that number for this talk, I found it in my head and I made it come out through my fingers. These are crazy things that we're surrounded by all the time. I don't know how that works, and that's how I make my living. Finding things in my head and making them come out through my fingers is what I do, and I don't know how it works. And now I'm using my throat and my mouth to make the air wiggle, which in turn makes little bones and hairs in your ears wiggle, and your brain understands that. Nothing is normal, right? Nothing is normal. Douglas Adams said it perfectly. He said, the fact that we live at the bottom of a deep gravity well, on the surface of a gas-covered planet, going around a nuclear fireball 90 million miles away, and think this to be normal, is some indication of how skewed our perspective tends to be. And from the beginning, I wanted my kids to see that wonder. I wanted them to see, forgetting my slides, I wanted them to see the world as unconditionally wonderful, unconditionally amazing. Not amazing if God exists, not amazing if God doesn't exist, not amazing if we have immortal souls, unconditionally amazing. I wanted them to see that. And I wanted them to have an insatiable curiosity about what's going on in the world, about what's behind the curtain. And I've been asked many times if I could give my kids one thing, just one thing, if it all boiled down to one quality. I thought for a while, what would that be? Would it be critical thinking, be intelligence, empathy, a sense of wonder, self-confidence? There are all sorts of things that I've thought are important for a kid. But the more I played around with those ideas, the more I realized that curiosity is the root of all of them. If you are incurious, you could fail to discover all of those things. But if you're insatiably curious, ravenously curious, right, you're going to, first of all, you're going to want to know how the world works. And so you're going to seek out the tools for that. That's critical thinking, right? And the more you develop critical thinking, the more you engage the world, the more intelligent you become about the world, the more you understand what's going on in the world. You develop a distaste for pretty stories that obscure the answers. And then that leads to the solid foundation for the things you hold true, right? If you know why you believe the things you believe, that leads to self-confidence. So there we've taken care of that. And curiosity leads kids to wonder what the world looks like through somebody else's eyes, right? They wonder, what does it look like for somebody who's a different race, somebody who's a different gender, somebody who's a different age, somebody who doesn't have the economic advantages that I have? They wonder those things, and there's the root of empathy, right? So all these various qualities start with curiosity. They start with being curious about the world. You can think of curiosity also as the link between wonder and understanding. Wonder is the start, and it's the thing that I recommend parents do, that they say wow a lot, or at least in some way express the wow. You step out the door, you see this magnificent, I would walk my daughter to the bus stop every morning and we would look at the sky, and there was always something amazing in the sky. Like the sky, you know? There's always something going on there, and we would always comment on it, and I'd say, wow, look at the color. This is amazing today, or look at the clouds, or look at the contrail from that plane. The next step is curiosity. Because you can say wow, and that's great, but curiosity is the bridge to understanding. So first you say wow, and then you say, I wonder why it's that color, you know? I wonder how the chameleon changes colors that way, or what. There's always you little roly-poly or pill bug. I don't know what you call them here. Is it? Yeah. Okay. And you poke it and it rolls up, right? And you say, wow, I wonder why it does that. And that's going to lead to my main topic here. One of the main sources of wonder that I found in my life and that I wanted to give my kids was an understanding of evolution. A lot of people think of evolution as a source of scientific knowledge about the world, but it's also an absolutely inexhaustible source of wonder. And the fact is that it can be baffling to kids, right? if you try to explain evolution and you say something like, well, gradually over time, animals turned into people, that just can't possibly give them anything but a very strange picture. That grandpa was a monkey or whatever the thing is. Adults don't get it. I mean, if you're going to take a 3-year-old kid and try to explain evolution, it's really going to be an uphill battle. So you don't try to explain evolution to a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. You start with the elements of evolution. You start with adaptation. That's really something that kids can understand right away. Camouflage is the best place to start with little kids because they find it fascinating. It is fascinating. Examples are all over the place. I remember taking a walk with my daughter. This is when we lived in Minneapolis, and we were in this place called the Quaking Bog. It's this fantastic park that had this had boardwalks through bog and all that sort of thing. We saw a deer at one point, and I mean barely saw the deer. This is not an actual picture, but this is a picture of 3 deer. There are 3 deer in this picture, and that's about what it looked like, and I could barely see the deer, and I said, oh, Lainey, look. Do you see the deer? I could just barely see the deer. And then you just take the opportunity to say the next sentence. You say, oh my gosh, if I was an animal that ate deer, I think I'd starve because I'd never find them, right? Just introduce that little idea. Then the thing to do is imagine a poor adaptation. So this is a good adaptation to keep them safe. Now imagine a poor one. Say, ooh, I think if I was a predator, I would only eat pink deer, right? I'd be able to spot them and I would eat them, but after a little while, there wouldn't be any more pink deer. They'd all be gone. You're just introducing the ideas that are eventually going to make evolution make an awful lot of sense and you're starting with these basics that they can understand. I stepped on a twig at that point as we started walking, and the deer, phew, it absolutely shot away. And I said, oh my gosh, and they're so fast I'd never catch them. I'd totally starve. I said, I think I would only eat slow pink deer. That would be the thing. Just gradually introducing those ideas. Then you move to natural selection. And you want to use a non-human example because evolution is such a long time scale. It's very, very difficult to get anybody to understand it on that time scale. So your best friend in this case is the peppered moth. If you are not familiar with the peppered moth, it takes about 10 minutes to tell the story, to do it credit. And I've got other things I need to tell, but look up the peppered moth. It is the knockdown evolution example. It is an example of natural selection happening on a rapid scale in the UK, 18th, 19th, 20th century. Look it up. It's absolutely fantastic. You know how good it is because creationists have spent an inordinate amount of time trying to show that the peppered moth is a flawed bit of research. And a lot of research has been done to show that they're wrong. And then the other thing that is your friend in talking about evolution is analogy. Richard Dawkins, Carl Sagan, the cosmic calendar. It's the most amazing thing. If you compress the history of the universe into a single year, with the Big Bang happening at the first second of January 1st, and we are standing on the last second of December 31st, right? And then you say, okay, when did the dinosaurs appear? And for most of my childhood, teenager or whatever, I would have said, well, before I discovered Carl Sagan, I would have said April. Dinosaurs in April, right? And that on that scale. Well, in April, the Milky Way galaxy hadn't even coalesced yet. That's May 1st. I shouldn't be getting into the details because I can't remember them all, but I think Earth, the solid Earth, is somewhere around September 1st. We don't have an oxygen atmosphere until December 1st on this scale. And we get dinosaurs on December 24th, Christmas Eve. We get dinosaurs, right? Dinosaurs are gone by December 28th. And we still don't have the Lords of the Universe, right? Humans don't appear until December 31st at 10:30 p.m. On the scale of the universe being a year, we've been here for 90 minutes, right? Columbus was 2 seconds ago, I think it is. That's the sort of thing that can make it click in. That's the sort of thing that can make these concepts start to click in just over time as your kids get older, you start to click it in. And my kids took to this approach really well, and they all developed an understanding and appreciation for evolution way beyond most adults. But no matter what you do, sometimes our kids will confront a culture that is determined to squelch that in them, to deny the understanding of it, and also to squelch the sense of wonder out of them. Sometimes it's overtly religious, sometimes it's just anti-science, but a lot of times it happens in the schools. And I'd like to give a few examples from my family's own experience in this. To give an example of some of my thoughts about how to respond when we do this. Okay, so shortly after we moved from Minneapolis to Atlanta 11 years ago, my son was in middle school. His biology teacher introduced the evolution unit. She taught the evolution unit, which is terrific, but she introduced it this way. She said, now, we're going to talk about evolution today, and it's very controversial, and I want you to know this is just one guy's opinion. And my son was furious, because at that point he was way beyond her, obviously. But when I asked what he wanted to do about it, he said, nothing, just leave it. And I said, you sure you don't want to talk to her? You could just, point out that that's not true. He said, hell no. I said, do you want me to talk? Hell no. All right. Okay, and here's the thing. I may have tried gently to convince him, but I know I didn't push much, because one of the things that I realized early on and that I think is a really good policy is to take your kids' guidance on these sorts of things. It's different when it's activism on the outside. There are all sorts of things that we can do on the outside, but when the child brings something to you and they are in the middle, they should be involved in the decision-making process for how to proceed. And as much as it killed me on occasion, there were 9 times when I wanted to contact the school or a teacher for some thing like that. And I decided early on that I would never do it without my child's permission. And the reason is this. If I go around them, I will never hear a story again. I will never hear the next thing that happens if I violate their trust in that way. And they're the ones, they don't want to be embarrassed, whatever the reason is. I took it and I said, and I promised all 3 of my kids, I will never do something like that unless you want me to. And as a result, I got to hear lots of stories, lots of good things and lots of bad things. I got to hear, for example, the time that Delaney was in 7th grade, standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Those were actual, in case anyone doesn't know, actual pictures of American school students in the 1940s doing what was called the Bellamy Salute to the flag. But Delaney decided to stop standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And not because of under God, as it happens, but because she thought that she could make up her own mind about what deserved her allegiance. And the first thing she did is she looked up the word allegiance after she realized that she had been saying this for years and wasn't actually clear on what that meant. And then when she saw what it meant, she stopped doing it. And the interesting thing is she didn't tell me. I didn't know she wasn't standing. And the nice thing about that is that she wasn't doing it for me. She wasn't doing it to impress Dad. I only learned that she wasn't standing for the pledge when she came home and told me that while she was sitting for the pledge that day, the IT guy who just happened to be in the room fixing something walked up to her and said in a menacing whisper, "You are not required to say the pledge, but you are required by law to stand up to show respect." Yeah. So she stood because there was this large, weirdly angry adult ordering her to. And through the red haze of my fury, I calmly asked her if she wanted me to talk to him about this, hoping she would say yes. I really wanted to talk to him. But she said no because he's not even a teacher. He was just the random IT guy who happened to be in the room. It was the kind of thing that she didn't want to pursue and make a big deal of. It was a sensible response in that way. But she said, "Is it true? Do I have to stand?" And I said, "I don't know," I lied. "You should find out." And it took her 10 minutes to find both the relevant Supreme Court ruling, West Virginia State Board of Education versus Barnett, 1943, and the current school district policy explicitly permitting students to abstain entirely from the pledge for any reason or no reason at all. And she resumed sitting the next day. Now, by the following year, she'd lost interest, which is also always fine. Don't push them and say, aren't you still mad about that? But another student had begun sitting during the pledge, which was interesting. One day, a substitute teacher told him that he had to stand, and Delaney objected. But the sub continued to demand compliance, and I asked Delaney if she wanted me to do something, and she said, no, it was just a sub, okay? So you see that we're out of the 9, they keep passing by here. But the following week, the teacher herself, the regular teacher, a history teacher, called the abstaining student up in front of the class and audibly asked if he had something against God. And then she said he needed a note from home if he was going to sit during the pledge. And this time, when I asked Delaney if she wanted me to talk to her, she suggested I talk to the principal and not even name the teacher, just say what happened, and suggest that the teachers be made of the district policy. But she said, wait a week, because we have a project due next week on individual rights. And she did this killer project on the right to abstain from the pledge and had the Supreme Court ruling and the school district policy. It was a really nice thing. And then once she got that back with an A, she said, go. Now, what she was suggesting was the least aggressive possible approach. She said, talk to the principal, but you don't even have to name the teacher because I really think she just doesn't know. You know, she's letting her personal opinion bleed over and all that, but she just needs to be made aware. And the rest of the staff needs to as well, because clearly this is a broader issue. I sent an email to the principal. Hi, Ms. Jones, not her real name. I said, my wife is a teacher and I used to be one, so I know what your days in your inbox are like. And still, the results at Acme Middle School are phenomenal. Start by saying something nice. It's just, they're people. And it just lets them know that you're at least sometimes nice, despite your next sentence. And in this case, it had the benefit of being true. This is a phenomenal school, really good school. And I continued. But something has come up that needs addressing. I've come to realize that district policy and law regarding the Pledge of Allegiance aren't well known by many of the teachers and staff. Now, honestly, the rest of the email is scribbling. Because once you mention that there are that there are violations of policy and law, principals tend to respond to this. Teachers sometimes don't know. Principals tend to have actual training in these. Teachers, again, my wife is a teacher. They have a lot that they're doing, okay? Principals, this is what they do. One of their jobs is to keep the district from being sued. That's one of the things that they're there for. And once you mention policy and law, assuming you're right about it, most principals, 98% of them, will quickly fix the problem. I continued, this has begun to cause a problem for my daughter Delaney and at least one other student. Reasonable dissent is a key value in our family, and Delaney has chosen to experiment with that by occasionally abstaining from the pledge. It's a good learning opportunity. Unfortunately, she has mostly learned that the adults in her school don't know the policy or law. Last year, she was scolded by an IT staffer who said that she had to stand. He was wrong about that. Now, that was juvenile of me because there are only 2 IT staffers on staff, and only one is male. Oopsie. I was really pissed at that guy. I just thought... So I then described the incidents with the sub and the teacher. And I said that I sent a note to the teacher because I had, sent a note to the teacher saying, students do not need permission to, so I want to be sure that you're not interpreting this as permission for Delaney to abstain from the pledge either, because I am not giving my permission for her to abstain because she doesn't need my permission to abstain. I am out of this completely. She has every right. Here's the Supreme Court decision and the policy that Delaney already included in her project. Now, is there an easy way to make the staff aware of this policy? And ideally, the reason for it. Sincerely, Delaney's dad. She wrote back immediately, thanking me for bringing it to her attention, and said that she would send out a clarification to the whole staff and CC me. Now, one of the reasons I got CC'd on the email is because I approached reasonably. And I think that's one of the great benefits, is that I ended up staying in the loop because I didn't come in with a flamethrower. Now, one of the things that I hear from a lot of parents, a lot of non-religious parents, is they want to protect their kids from the nonsense, right? They get so angry, they don't want their kids to experience this nonsense. You really don't want to protect them from the nonsense. You want them to encounter it, and you want them to be part of the solution and part of the answer to the nonsense, because they're going to encounter it all their lives when you're not there. This is part of their education. This is something that they can do. Clearly, they can do. That requires us to step as far back as we reasonably can, but sometimes you can't. And when Delaney was in 3rd grade, and this is the main story I want to share with you. When Delaney was in 3rd grade, she wanted to be a paleontologist. So we've gone back a few years before the pledge thing. She entered a national contest called Evolution and Art, sponsored by Charlie's Playhouse, which is a company that made evolution-based games. Fabulous company. They're not around anymore, but really a good place. Here are the contest rules. Imagine an island with a unique environment. Choose an existing animal to put on the island. Fast forward 1 million years or so, and imagine how the animal would evolve as a result of that environment. Draw a picture of the evolved animal and explain. Isn't that cool? Very cool. Her entry was a purple polka-dotted monkey with huge ears and sharp teeth. And her explanation said the island has purple polka-dotted trees and bushes and quiet predators. The only food is hard nuts. So after a long, long time, the monkeys evolved to have purple polka dots, huge ears to hear the predators, and sharp teeth to crack the nuts. 3rd grade. Thank you very much. Yes. She won her age category in this national contest, and she nearly passed out. Now, we let her teacher know about it, and he showered her with kudos, and then forwarded the news to the front office. And a few days later, we got a call from Ms. Warner, the assistant principal, and my wife answered the phone. And when she hung up the phone, she was clearly upset. She said, Lainey is going to be interviewed by the principal on the Eagle News, which is their closed circuit, TV program. And she said, but Ms. Warner said that they're not going to call it an evolution and art contest, just an art contest.